Norcia from Ram Clutches. Today we're going to take a look at the installation procedure for a Ram hydraulic release bearing. In this case we're going to use a T56 or like a Tremec 6060 bell housing to do the setup. Your transmission may already have a collar in place, or you may have purchased a Ford kit that has a replacement collar that you're going to change out on the front of your transmission. So let's take a look at what's involved here. Now the first thing we're going to do is install the fittings in the bearing, and you want to make sure you use Teflon tape on the fittings here. Don't use liquid sealants, don't use any Loctite, anything like that. This is really the only way to seal this thing up effectively. We know this from experience. So we'll thread the fittings into the bearing. And then we're going to use a 7/16 wrench to snug those in place. On the bleed fitting, this comes in two pieces as well. You want to use Teflon tape here as well and install the bleed fitting into the adapter itself. This is going to hang out of the bell housing, and you'll actually turn this screw to do the bleeding procedure once we get it all installed in the car. The bearing itself has 800 thousandths of potential travel, and so when we set this up, we want to make sure that we set it up close enough that we're going to get the right amount of movement, the right amount of space between the bearing and the fingers, but yet we're not going to over travel it to the snap ring. Now here we're going to take and measure the distance of the crankshaft from the back of the block. This is our first critical measurement. So we're going to lay a straight bar across the back of the crank. We're going to use our dial calipers to measure down and get this dimension. And then when we're done, we also have to make sure that we subtract the thickness of this straight bar from our number. And we'll go ahead and record that crank flange protrusion here on our setup diagram on the Ram instruction sheet. The second procedure is to measure the actual height of the clutch. This would be the measurement from the fingers to the back flange of the flywheel. And this needs to be done with the clutch completely bolted in place, just like it would be in the car. So we'll take our straight bar and lay it across the fingers, and we're going to measure right down between the fingers through the center hub of the disc to the back flange of the flywheel. If your flywheel is recessed, you may need to set it up on a pedestal so you're getting a true measurement here. And once again, we're going to subtract the thickness of that straight bar out from our number. And we'll record that clutch height measurement as well on our drawing on the Ram instruction sheet. The final measurement we need to take is the bearing position in the bell housing. So here on our T56 bell, we're going to go ahead and install the base collar that the bearing is going to sit against. I've already installed the stud in here, and that's the drive stud that the bearing is going to ride against to keep it from rotating in the bell housing. Now we'll slide the bearing down over the collar and get it into position. Now we're going to take our straight bar and we'll lay it across the face of the bell housing, and we're going to measure from this face down to the face of the release bearing, and that will give us that position in the bell housing. Of course, this is with no shim, so we're probably going to have to make some adjustments here once we do these numbers. Again, we want to make sure and subtract the thickness of the straight bar. And then we'll go ahead and record this number on our instruction sheet drawing as well. Now let's take a look at how these numbers shake out. Our dimension A on the drawing is the crank flange position. We're at 0.300. Our dimension C is the total clutch height, which is 3.050. So that gives us a total height of the clutch from the back of the block of 3.350. Now taking that clutch height number and our measurement we took in the bell housing, we've got a fully retracted position of the bearing of 3.650 and our clutch height at 3.350. So right now the bearing is sitting 300 thousandths off the clutch fingers in its fully retracted position. Now, this is a little bit too much. Typically we're looking for about 200 thousandths on a dual disc install, and we're looking for about 150 on a single disc install. So now we're going to go back to our bell housing, and we're going to remove the bearing, and we're going to put a couple of these cone-shaped shims in here, which are going to shim the bearing up and reduce that gap we have of 300 thousandths now. We'll try and get it down to somewhere around 200. So we'll slide the bearing back on, and then we're going to take our straight bar once again and measure down to the bearing. Now looking at our new numbers, now our dimension fully retracted on the bearing is 3.545, and we subtract our clutch height from that, and now we've got a gap of 0.195, which is just about right on the money for a dual disc clutch. So this part of the procedure is done. Now we've got our basic setup and position of the bearing completed. The next thing we want to do is check the position of the drive stud, that is the length of the drive stud, with the bearing fully extended. So we don't want that stud to be so long that it's going to contact on the clutch cover. We may need to trim it. So we'll push the bearing out to its full extension and drop it back on the stud. And now if you look at the gap here, you'll see we've got about 1/4 inch of the stud sticking up. Not enough that's really going to make a difference on the install and should not contact the cover. If that length was excessive there, then you may need to trim that back. You could go back about as far as the level of the slot itself. You just want to make sure the full stud is engaged in that slot. So now that we've got that completed, we're going to go ahead and attach our lines to the bearing, and we'll just thread these on here, and once we're done with that, snug those up with a 7/16 wrench. Now we're going to go ahead and route our lines through the opening in the bell housing. This may be your fork window, or in this case on the T56 we've got a couple of windows, so we're going to run one line out one side and one line out the other. And then we'll have that bearing in the position it needs to be and the line sticking out so we can make an easy connection. And we'll go ahead and thread our bleeder fitting on here, and we'll snug that up. And you want to use the top port for that so that when you're doing your bleeding, you're forcing that fluid up through the bearing to get a good bleed. Now on the other end, we've got our adapter fitting, and this is going to adapt straight into the factory master cylinder. So we'll thread that in position and lock that down with a 7/16 wrench as well. Now that we have our lines in position, the last thing we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and install a ram bearing adjuster here. This is going to allow us to control our pedal position in relation to the floor. Most of the time, hydraulic bearings are going to engage fairly high up on the pedal. Personally, that's not comfortable for me. I want to get that pedal down to about the midpoint. So by installing this adjuster, you have that flexibility to go ahead and put that pedal position where you want it to be. Well, now we're ready to wrap this job up. You can go ahead and install the clutch on the motor, and we could get the transmission reinstalled. As you can see, this is really not a terribly difficult procedure to do. It's just real important that you take your time with the measurements, measure it once, twice, a third time. Doing all that work on the front end is going to save you having to go back into the transmission or into the car and make further adjustments down the road, or have any issues with the install itself.